Beneath the same sun that once watched our ancestors chained and carried away, now stands a generation unchained, a generation that refuses to kneel. My brothers and sisters of Africa, my people of Namibia, and all who still believe in the dignity of mankind today, I speak not from a palace, but from the wound and the will of our continent. This is not a day for ceremony. This is not a day for applause. This is a day for truth, a truth buried deep beneath the red earth of Africa, waiting for someone brave enough to dig it out again. For too long, our story has been told by others, written in languages we did not choose, signed under contracts we did not understand, and sold for prices we never agreed to. They called it aid. They called it partnership. But every time we smiled for their cameras, another vein of gold was taken, another river poisoned, another promise broken. And through it all, Africa remained silent, proud, wounded, and misunderstood. But today, that silence ends. Because somewhere in the heart of this continent, a voice has risen. A voice not wrapped in diplomacy or fear, but in fire. When I first heard it, I felt what our ancestors must have felt before a storm, the air itself trembling with destiny. That voice did not belong to Europe, nor to America. It belonged to us. It belonged to Africa. And that voice has a name, Ibrahim Traore. When he spoke, the world dismissed him as reckless, but the people recognized something sacred, truth without permission. He did not read from scripts written in Western offices. He spoke from the heart of the soil itself, from the hunger of miners, the prayers of mothers, and the pride of soldiers who still fight barefoot but refuse to bow. He reminded us that leadership is not a privilege, it is a promise. That freedom is not granted, it is taken. That wealth is not in gold, it is in the courage to protect it. Africa has been the richest continent under the ground and the poorest above it. That paradox is no accident. It was built, refined, and maintained by a world that profits from our silence. But this generation will not be silent. Not anymore. Because the wind that once carried the songs of slaves now carries a new anthem, the anthem of awakening. Across the deserts of the Sahel, through the forests of Congo, to the shores of Namibia, you can feel it. Africa breathing differently. We are no longer waiting for salvation. We are becoming our own salvation. So, as the sun sets over this ancient land, I say to you, this is not another political speech. This is a declaration of memory and rebirth. The age of dependency has ended. The age of dignity begins today. The world has underestimated us for centuries, but let them watch closely now, because the sleeping giant is not sleeping anymore. Africa is awake, and Africa is speaking. When history speaks, it rarely whispers. Sometimes, it chooses one voice, one defiant, unyielding voice to remind a continent of who it truly is. That voice today belongs to President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso. When I first heard him speak, I did not hear the polished tone of a diplomat. I heard the heartbeat of Africa itself, raw, honest, unfiltered. I heard a soldier who carried not a crown, but a cross. A young lion who had seen the dust of war, the betrayal of treaties, and still chose to fight, not for power, but for purpose. He stood before the world and said the words that every African had felt but never dared to say aloud. If this gold is ours, why do we only own 10% of it? In that question lay centuries of silence broken. It was not merely about minerals or money, it was about meaning. For generations, our leaders had been told to accept the rules of the game, even when the game was rigged. They were praised when they obeyed, punished when they resisted, and forgotten when they fell. But Traoré refused to play. He flipped the board. He said to the world, Africa will no longer trade its dignity for applause. And those words spread like wildfire from the copper mines of Zambia to the oil fields of Nigeria, from the gold towns of Ghana to the uranium deserts of Niger. Because every worker, every farmer, every student understood him instantly. He was not just speaking for Burkina Faso, he was speaking for all of us. Under his leadership, contracts once signed in silence were read aloud under the Sunday agreements written in Paris or London were questioned in Ouagadougou. And for the first time, the soil beneath African feet began to feel like it truly belonged to its people. Many in the West called him dangerous. But dangerous to whom? To poverty? To corruption? To the arrogance that believes Africa must always ask for permission? If that is danger, then may we all be dangerous. Traoré reminded us that sovereignty is not a slogan, it is a daily decision. He understood that freedom does not arrive as a gift wrapped in foreign aid. It grows in the calloused hands of those who dare to build their own tomorrow. It did not reject cooperation. He rejected deception. He did not fight against the world. He fought for fairness within it. And in that courage, he became more than a president. He became a mirror that forces us, every African leader, to ask, have we served our people or have we only served our fears? When I look at Traore, I see the reflection of an Africa reborn, an Africa that no longer apologizes for existing, an Africa that no longer confuses humility with submission. He speaks with the calm of conviction and the fire of truth. And in his words, I hear the echoes of those who came before Sankara, Lumumba, Nkrumah, voices that once shook empires and still echo through our blood. The difference now is that this generation is listening. And this time, we will not let their vision die in history books, because every empire built on our silence will tremble before our unity. Traore has given us something far greater than policy. He has given us permission to believe again. To believe that Africa can lead, can innovate, can define its own destiny. So when I say his name, I do not speak it as a title of power, but as a torch that lights the way for every young African who still wonders whether courage can still change the world. It can, and it has begun. For centuries, Africa's chains were not made of iron, they were made of paper. Contracts, clauses, signatures written in foreign tongues, and every line was a quiet theft. They came to us with handshakes and smiles, wearing suits instead of uniforms, bringing briefcases instead of guns. They called themselves partners, but in truth, they were architects of dependency. They promised schools, but built mines. They promised progress, but shipped it away in cargo. They promised freedom, but left us with debt. Under those contracts, our mountains bled gold while our children went hungry. The wealth beneath our feet became the curse that kept us kneeling. The world called it development, but for Africa, it was a funeral of dignity held in boardrooms far from our soil. And yet, for decades, our leaders signed. They smiled for cameras, toasted to international cooperation, and told us it was the price of progress. But progress for whom? When a hospital has no medicine, when a farmer cannot afford his own harvest, when a country rich in diamonds cannot buy clean water, that is not progress. That is betrayal disguised as diplomacy. Then came Ibrahim Traore, young, fearless, unpolished, unbought. He looked at those same documents that had enslaved nations and asked the simplest question in the world. If this gold is ours, why do we only own 10% of it? And in that moment, every lie trembled. He ordered every mining contract to be reviewed line by line, truth by truth. He told the foreign companies, if you cannot respect our people, you cannot stay on our land. They called him radical. They called him naive. But what they feared most was that his courage would prove contagious. And it did. Because when one nation dares to reclaim its dignity, others remember their worth too. In Ghana, in Mali, in Niger, the same question began to echo, why do we own so little of what is ours? The silence that once blanketed the continent began to tear apart. But make no mistake, Traore's fight was never against the West. His war was with the system that taught Africa to survive by submission. He was not rejecting partnership, he was rewriting the terms. No more hidden clauses. No more false promises wrapped in the language of aid. He demanded transparency, fairness, and most of all, respect. He reminded us that wealth without control is an illusion, that oil means nothing if it cannot light our homes, that diamonds mean nothing if they do not bring clean water to our villages, and that gold, the same gold that adorns crowns in Europe, means nothing if it cannot build a school in Burkina Faso. That is the essence of the revolution he began, not a revolution of bullets, but of balance. He replaced dependency with dignity. He turned exploitation into education. He transformed anger into awakening. And the world, for the first time in decades, began to look at Africa with unease not because of chaos, but because of clarity. Because a continent that understands its value is a continent that can no longer be controlled. This is what frightens them. Not our weapons, not our armies, but our awakening. Traore did not teach us to hate. He taught us to see. To see that the true empire is not in armies or flags, it is in who controls the narrative of wealth. And he gave us back that narrative. Africa's minerals are no longer a curse. They are the keys to our rebirth. And as long as this generation remembers that truth, no signature in the world can enslave us again. They called it a speech. But it became a spark. What began in the heart of Burkina Faso did not stop at its borders. It moved like thunder across the savannas, through the red dunes, past rivers and mountains, until the entire continent began to tremble with recognition. For the first time in generations, Africa was not reacting to the world. The world was reacting to Africa. They named it the Traoré effect. But to those who felt it, it was something deeper, a memory awakening. In Mali, workers refused to load another shipment of gold until the contract was renegotiated. In Ghana, students held seminars titled Our Resources, Our Responsibility. In Namibia, farmers formed cooperatives to sell directly to regional markets instead of waiting for foreign buyers. And in city squares from Dakar to Nairobi, murals began to appear, a young man in a military beret, his gaze steady, his message simple: Africa belongs to Africans. It was no longer about one country. It was a movement, quiet yet unstoppable, rooted in pride and watered by truth. Governments that once feared to speak began reopening old agreements. Economists, long trained to think in the language of donors, started to think in the language of dignity. Even the youth, the generation once told to leave, to seek their dreams elsewhere, began to stay. They saw that the future was not somewhere beyond the sea. It was here, under their own feet. And yet, not everyone celebrated. In Western capitals, alarm bells rang behind closed doors. Reports labeled Traoré's model unorthodox, risky, nationalist, but what they truly meant was uncontrollable. Because a self-reliant Africa means an Africa that can no longer be manipulated. Still, the movement grew. It was not fueled by hatred, but by hunger, the hunger for fairness, for balance, for a voice that had been silenced too long. It reminded the world that partnership cannot exist where exploitation hides behind diplomacy. It declared that cooperation must be born from equality, not dependency. The Traoré effect was never about one man. It was about one idea, that the soil of Africa no longer needs permission to bloom, that we have everything we need: land, youth, spirit, and will. What we lacked was the courage to say no. Now, that courage has become contagious. And the contagion is not disease, it is dignity. Across Africa, a wind has begun to blow, fierce, clean, and ancient. It carries with it the voices of miners and mothers, teachers and soldiers, all whispering the same sentence: we are not poor, we are powerful. And perhaps, for the first time in centuries, the rest of the world has begun to believe it too. Because when Africa stands, the earth itself listens. Let me say this clearly, so that even those who pretend not to hear will finally understand: Africa is not poor. It has been made poor. Our poverty was not born from the land, it was engineered from the outside. For centuries, our riches were extracted, our leaders manipulated, our history rewritten. They said we were developing, yet our gold built their banks, our diamonds crowned their kings, and our uranium lit their cities. While we were told to wait, to borrow, to beg, the world developed from our silence. But that silence is over. When Traoré stood before his people and declared that Africa must refine its own gold, many in the world smirked. Too ambitious, they said, too risky. But what is risk compared to centuries of theft? What is ambition compared to the right to survive with dignity? He taught us that aid is not a gift when it arrives wrapped in interest, that loans are not generosity when they come with invisible chains. For too long, Africa believed that progress required permission, that prosperity needed validation from across the sea. But the truth is simpler: no one will feed a nation they plan to control. Africa's greatest tragedy was never lack of wealth, it was lack of ownership. Our tragedy was not ignorance, it was the belief that our wisdom had to be translated to matter. And our tragedy was not weakness, it was division, the easiest weapon ever used against us. Today, that weapon no longer works. Because Africa is learning to speak one language again, the language of ownership, of integrity, of courage. We are beginning to see that wealth is not what lies under our ground, it is what grows inside our spirit. True wealth is when a farmer owns his harvest, when a miner earns more than survival, when a child studies under light powered by her own nation's energy. True wealth is when we can look at our resources and say, this is ours, and it serves our people first. This is not arrogance, it is balance. This is not rebellion, it is restoration. Traoré's message is not an attack, it is an awakening. He reminds the world that partnership cannot exist where one side always loses. He reminds us that freedom is not an anthem sung on Independence Day. It is a policy, a decision, a discipline. And above all, he reminds every African that destiny is not negotiated in foreign capitals. It is written in the calloused hands of those who till, build, and teach. Let the world know this. We are not closing our doors. We are opening them on our terms. We are not rejecting cooperation. We are redefining it. We are not escaping the world. We are inviting it to meet us as equals. Because true partnership begins where exploitation ends. Africa is not a land to be pitied. It is a continent to be respected. We are not a museum of suffering. We are the forge of tomorrow. And to those who still doubt, look closely. The same hands that once carried chains are now shaping the future. The same soil once soaked in tears now grows new strength. Africa's story is no longer written by others. We are writing it ourselves in the ink of truth and the language of dignity. And when that story is read, the world will no longer call us poor. They will call us what we have always been, the origin of power. To my fellow leaders of Africa, my brothers, my sisters, let me speak to you not as a president, but as a daughter of this continent, as one who has seen too many treaties signed with trembling hands and too many dreams buried under polite silence. Do not fear Ibrahim Traore's courage. Fear instead what will become of us if we continue without it. He does not shame us. He reminds us. He reminds us of what we once were, warriors of integrity, guardians of our people, voices that thundered against injustice. We were not meant to rule from distance or fear. We were born to serve with courage. Leadership is not the art of survival. It is the act of sacrifice. Our people are watching. They no longer listen to words. They measure truth by action. They have seen promises rise and fall like dry rain. They do not need more speeches from marble halls. They need leaders who walk barefoot on the same ground they do. Let us be honest with ourselves. We have traded too much dignity for comfort, too much sovereignty for security, too much truth for applause. But power means nothing if it does not protect the powerless. And no nation can call itself free while its leaders speak with borrowed tongues. This is our moment of reckoning. The world will not hand us respect. We must command it through unity and integrity. We must stop competing for the attention of those who profit from our division. When one African nation stands, the others must not watch. We must rise together, for unity is not a dream, it is our only defense. To the youth of Africa, the heartbeat of our future, listen closely. You are not too young. They said the same to Sankara, to Lumumba, to every soul who ever changed history. The world will try to tell you that you are powerless. But the truth is, you are the generation that will finish the revolution our ancestors began. Your weapon is not the gun, it is the mind. Your battlefield is not the desert, it is the classroom, the workshop, the field, the screen. And your victory will not be measured in conquests, but in creation, in how many ideas you dare to build, how many lives you choose to uplift, how many lies you refuse to believe. Do not wait for approval abroad. Define your worth here. Do not seek validation from those who never valued your ancestors. Seek wisdom from the soil that raised you. The world has taken enough from Africa. It has stolen our minerals, our labor, even our narrative. But it cannot steal our imagination, not if you protect it. You are the bridge between memory and destiny. You must build factories where there was once famine, schools where there was once silence, and hope where there was once hunger. You must prove that the greatest resource of Africa is not gold, not oil, not diamonds, it is you. So rise, young sons and daughters of this continent. Rise with discipline, rise with purpose, rise with fire in your spirit and humility in your heart. Because when this generation stands, no empire will ever again call Africa small. And to those who doubt you, tell them this. The youth of Africa do not inherit poverty, they inherit unfinished revolutions. And this time, we will finish them. Something is happening in Africa, something the world can neither predict nor prevent. It is not a protest. It is not a coup. It is a consciousness. The wind that once carried the cries of slaves now carries the songs of awakening. Across the Sahel, in the markets of Lagos, in the valleys of Rwanda, and the ports of Maputo, there is a pulse, steady, strong, and unstoppable. It is the sound of Africa remembering itself. For generations, we were told to bow, to wait, to obey, to ask for permission. But that age is over. The era of submission has ended, and the era of sovereignty has begun. This is not arrogance. It is awareness. It is the quiet understanding that no continent born of such resilience was ever meant to live on its knees. When Ibrahim Traore speaks, he does not shout to the world, he reminds it. He reminds the powerful that dignity cannot be negotiated. He reminds the weak that strength is not in armies, but in unity. And he reminds all of us that freedom is not granted, it is claimed. Africa will still trade with the world, but with fairness. We will still cooperate, but with clarity. We will still engage, but as equals. We have learned that no alliance is worth our silence, and no contract is worth our soul. Because true progress is not when our leaders dine abroad, but when our children eat at home. To those who still see Africa through the eyes of pity, hear me now. We do not need your sympathy. We need your respect. Because the world you built on our resources will soon have to reckon with our return. The continent you once called developing is developing something you never planned for consciousness. The same minerals that built your empires now build our independence. The same people you enslaved now teach the world the meaning of endurance. Look around, the miners are organizing, the farmers are innovating, the youth are coding, the women are leading, the soldiers are guarding not only borders but values. Every heartbeat of this continent hums with one message: we are awake. And once a continent awakens, no power can put it back to sleep. Traore's courage has become more than a story. It is a mirror. In it, Africa sees not its wounds, but its potential. We see not what was taken, but what remains. And what remains is everything: land, faith, will, and unity. The empires of the past were built on the illusion of our silence. The future of Africa will be built on the symphony of our voices. Let the West call it whatever they wish: nationalism, populism, rebellion. We know its true name: restoration. Africa is not turning against the world. Africa is returning to itself. And when that return is complete, history will not record it as a revolution of politics, but as a revolution of spirit. Because the real power of this continent has never been in its gold or oil, it has always been in its people. We are the children of those who endured the impossible. We are the heirs of a dignity that no colonizer could erase. And now, we are the generation that will finish what was begun, the liberation of the African soul. So let the drums of this awakening echo beyond our borders. Let the world listen, for this is not a whisper. This is the roar of a continent reborn. The age of silence is over. The age of African awakening has begun. And so, my brothers and sisters of Africa, my friends across the oceans, as the first light of dawn touches this ancient land, I stand before you not as a leader, but as a witness. A witness to something greater than politics, deeper than economics, a rebirth. The rebirth of a continent that was never lost, only silenced. For centuries, the world looked at Africa and saw only what it wanted to see: hunger, war, corruption. But it never saw the heartbeat. It never saw the mother who teaches under a tree, the farmer who prays before the rain, the child who dreams of building airplanes from scrap metal. That is Africa, not a tragedy, but a testimony. Today, that heartbeat grows louder. We are no longer waiting for saviors. We are becoming our own salvation. We will write our own books, refine our own gold, build our own schools, and protect our own dignity. Because the power we seek has always lived within us. We just needed to believe again. I say this to every African listening: the time of permission is over. No one will tell our story better than we can. No one will guard our future better than we will. No one will love Africa the way Africa loves her children. So let this be the beginning of a new covenant, not between nations, but between generations. Let us promise our children that we will leave them more than debt and speeches. We will leave them a continent that finally stood tall. Let us promise that when they speak of Africa, they will no longer whisper pity. They will speak the word with pride. And to the world watching us, hear this clearly. Africa does not rise against you. Africa rises for itself. We do not seek revenge. We seek respect. We do not crave your approval. We claim our equality. The age of silence is over. The era of awakening has begun. And no empire, new narrative, new propaganda can stop it now. Because this is not just history, it is prophecy. The drums of Africa are beating again, and this time they beat for freedom. So if these words moved you, if you too believe that dignity, courage, and unity can still change the world, then stand with us. Click subscribe Share this message and let it echo to every corner of the earth. Be part of this awakening, because the story of Africa is not theirs to tell, it is ours to live. This is Ibrahim Traore. This is our voice. And together, we rise. Night falls over the savannah. The horizon burns gold, then crimson, then black, as if the sky itself remembers the fire that once lived in the hearts of those who came before us. Somewhere in the distance, a drum beats softly, slow, steady, eternal. It is the same rhythm that once guided our ancestors through deserts and oceans. The same rhythm that whispered courage to the freedom fighters in the forests of Mozambique, in the valleys of Ethiopia, in the streets of Ouagadougou. And tonight it beats again, not for war, but for awakening. Ibrahim Traore's name is no longer just a name. It has become a symbol, a spark carried by the wind, finding new hearts to ignite. You can feel it in the markets of Accra, in the classrooms of Dakar, in the music of Lagos. You can feel it in the pride of a miner who now knows the gold he touches belongs to his people. You can see it in the eyes of a child who no longer dreams of leaving Africa to live, but dreams of staying to build. That is the miracle of awakening. It begins with one voice, but it never ends there. Every continent has its turning point. Ours is now. And though the road ahead will be long and heavy with trials, remember this. Every sunrise begins in darkness. Every empire begins with belief. And every generation that refuses to kneel becomes the foundation of a freer world. So when you wake tomorrow and see the sun rise above our lands, know that it rises not only for Burkina Faso or Namibia, it rises for all of us. For every African soul who still believes that dignity is not a privilege, but a birthright. The drumbeat continues. The fire still burns. And Africa, proud, patient, powerful, walks forward once more. If this story touched you, if you believe that truth and courage can still change the course of nations, join us. Like this video, share it, and subscribe to Ibrahim Traore, where voices rise, where truth is spoken, and where the spirit of this continent lives on. Because this is not the end. This is the beginning of the African century. Africa has awakened, and the fire will never die.